Hello, and welcome to Take 5, where we talk with people about their own personal top 5 films, but with a twist. Many of us find it hard to choose just 5 or even 10 films, so I've asked each person to pick a theme for their top 5 films. It might be their top 5 Fast and the Furious films, or even their top 5 non-George Lucas Star Wars movies. But the goal is just to hear from people who love movies and the kinds of experiences that film can give us. Today, I'm joined by Heston College Dean of Faculty, Dr. Carren Moham. Welcome, Dr. Moham, and thank you for joining me today.
Good afternoon, and it's good to be here. And I am, as usual, decided that any opportunity to discuss Star Trek is a great opportunity. So thank you.
So that's a great introduction. Today we're talking with Dr. Moham about her top 5 Star Trek movies. And so I'm going to begin maybe with a pretty simple question, but maybe it's complicated as well. Why Star Trek?
Well, I've always just loved science fiction. My mother tells me that even as a little kid, whenever there would be any kind of science fiction program on TV, I would stop whatever I was doing and just really just get mesmerized by what was going on the screen. And then also I like imagining things. And one of my favorite sayings is that if it can be imagined, it can be done. And I think that science fiction gives us the opportunity to really imagine science possible, is what I like to say, science possible. And in watching Star Trek, you just see many of the ideas that we are accustomed to today, that things that we use today, we can see even back in the old Star Trek from the 60s. And I really have watched them all down through the years, even the animated Star Trek. A lot of people very often, did you watch the animated series? Indeed, I did. So I'm curious. I like, just sort of imagining what could be possible. And I think Star Trek gives us the opportunity to do that. I also love action, and there's action in Star Trek. Yeah.
What kinds, is there a film that you maybe didn't like the first time you watched it? And this might be about sort of any film, not just a Star Trek film, that maybe you changed your perspective on, or that your sort of view on it changed maybe a second time through?
Well, jumping just way off of Star Trek, but one was the film Glory.
Mm.
And I won't go into a lot of what it's about, but I think that when I first watched it as a younger person, and just seeing all of the just sort of, it was a lot of racism, a lot of horrible things that happened to people who were just trying to find a better way. And so when I first saw that, it just, I don't know, it just kind of hurt me. I just felt hurt by it. But when I went back and watched it again, being older and wiser, I saw a lot more of what the director was trying to show. And I saw that, it starred Denzel Washington, and just seeing Denzel Washington's character and what this character went through and how this character grew, and the defiance that this character showed, that really, in order to keep himself, to keep his soul, this defiance was actually what helped him to maintain. And so, yeah, so I went back and saw it from a different lens. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So today, you've shared with us your top 5 Star Trek movies, and we'll sort of lead through here, and I'll ask you just to share a little bit about this. So I want to start with one of my personal favorites. It might just be because it features an extensive amount of Shakespeare, but Star Trek 6 as the Undiscovered Country is your number 5. Tell
Mm-hmm.
us a little bit about this film and sort of why it's a film that you love.
Okay. Well, I'm going to fess up. I have some notes here because I know that when I start talking about Star Trek, I can really get off script. So, and I can talk for days. So I'm going to just try to stick to it here. But Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, I believe was 1991. I want to say, and it just had a lot of different elements that appealed to me. And first of all, it's the original crew. So you just can't go wrong with the original crew, in my humble opinion. And it dealt with, for lack of a better word, a lot of what I would say are real world events. peace treaties, bankruptcy, working through your own personal emotions and pain and to get the job done. So Kirk having to work through, in this case, the Klingons and the Federation are struggling to get a peace treaty together to end the war between their two empires. And but if they get this peace treaty worked out, then the Klingons, who are close to bankruptcy, can save their empire. So all of this was going on. But then it was made even more difficult by the fact that Kirk blamed the Klingons for the death of his son. So you had all of that. And of course, his son died in, I think it's Star Trek 3. So the search for Spock. And so you had all of this working. There were just so many elements in it that were working together. But again, number one, the original crew. So
yeah. Very nice. All right, well, we'll move right along here. This is one I have really strong memories of growing up watching this movie as well. Number 4 is Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
Voyage Home.
Tell us a little bit about this. It sort of is a fish out of water story a lot of the time. Yeah, what appeals to you in this film?
Honestly, Donovan, I just thought, first of all, it was just a lot of fun. It was a fun movie to watch. It was fun to watch the crew just sort of have these comedic moments. And again, the original cast, but I think also the fact that it was directed by Leonard Nimoy, which, you know, he proved himself to be really a really good director. There was another one here that I liked that he also directed. And of course, in usual fashion, Kirk and the crew are kind of outlaws. You know, they're, due to their actions in Star Trek 3, they're kind of, you know, outlaws. And you've got this, you know, all the alien stuff, the alien probe that could destroy the Earth. And the only beings that can communicate with this probe are the hunchback whales. And it's like, how's this going to work, you know? But so then, of course, they've got to travel back to, 1985 or 6,
I think, yeah.
San Francisco, to get some hunchback whales to bring back to communicate with this probe to keep it from destroying the Earth. So, and of course, they're successful naturally. But then, of course, all kinds of things ensue. And it really is, it doesn't sound like it should work, but it really does. And it's really just a fun movie to watch. And then, of course, there's probably some deeper themes in there, like, you know, conservation and saving endangered species and that kind of thing. But really just a lot of fun with the original crew again.
Absolutely. So at number 3, this might be sort of a group, maybe a bit of a cheat here, but it's the J.J. Abrams Star Trek. Tell us a little bit about what appeals to you in this and sort of what your thoughts are on this kind of modern take on this. So is this the Star Trek, the one called Star Trek? Or is it
Star Trek,
altogether?
I think it came out in the 2009, I guess, 2010. Something like that. But I have to be honest, I waffled about putting this one on the list, on my top 5, because, you know, I'm a little bit of a Star Trek purist. And so, and it kind of jumps the shark, you know, in a few different ways. But, and one of the things that annoyed me right off the bat was that the Enterprise isn't built in space. It's built on Earth. And I'm just like, really? I mean, seriously, you know, so, but I won't get too much in that. But again, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it was slick, it was shiny, it had Romulans, it had action. Eric Bana was an amazing Romulan bad guy. I really liked Chris Pine in the role of Kirk and Zachary Quinto in the role of Spock. I really thought that they really embodied the characters really well. He was, you know, Kirk's kind of a cowboy, and he really embodied that really well. So even though like I said, I waffled, but I looked at it as it's a different Star Trek it's a new Star Trek for a new generation. And you don't have to know really a lot about the old Star Trek in order to enjoy this. And so in that way, I thought J.J. Abrams really made a movie that you could really enjoy without having to know anything at all about the Star Trek world.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And we're getting into the classics here. Number 2, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Tell us a little bit about this one. Yeah, because this is one that I remember having kind of interesting mixed feelings about when I watched it the first time.
Mm-hmm. And this is one that I really can just go off the rails on. So I didn't look at my notes on the other ones, but I'm going to look at my notes a little bit because I can, but this one also was directed by Leonard Nimoy. And I really think that he, how do I say this? He did a good job, I think, of building off of Star Trek II and just sort of taking up the mantle and building from Star Trek II, making that bridge. And so I thought that was done really well. And, you have the whole thing of where Kirk has defeated his enemy, his arch enemy, but in the process, he's lost his ship and he has lost his best friend. Who of course Spock has given his life to save the rest of the crew. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and so you've got that whole thing in there. Kirk has kind of inherited, I guess, would be Spock's essence, or what do they call it? His katra. So he has inherited. He's got Spock's essence within him now, and then of course you got Kirk, still the cowboy. And the steals the ship and and travels to Vulcan so they can take Spock's body back so that they can perform the ceremony which needs to be performed on Vulcan to reunite Spock's essence with his body. And then of course all of that is successful. Spock has some memory gaps, but pretty much the whole process is successful, but there's just a lot going on while all of this is happening. But there's also just a lot in the movie. There's a lot of really storylines going on because you've got the crew sticking together to achieve a common goal, even one that they are not supposed to be doing, but they all stick together. It shows real friendship, what you would do for a friend. I'm kind of looking at, if you want to look at the biblical side of it, greater love has no man than you lay your life down for a friend. And so I was looking at that and also making those hard choices, making the choice to put myself in jeopardy to help someone else or to give my life to help someone else. So you've got all of even stealing the ship. See, all things are really, really, really hard choices. And so, and just laying everything on the line for something that you believe in. So like I said, there was just a lot, to me, a lot deeper meanings than it just being a Star Trek adventure movie. There was a lot in there. So yeah, I mean, I know that people were but honestly, I thought that it was well directed. Like I said, Leonard Nimoy, he understands the Star Trek universe. And I think that when he directed one of the Star Trek films, that really came through, that he understood the Star Trek universe. And I think that it shows in this particular Star Trek too, that he understands the Star Trek universe and pretty much stayed true to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And at number 1, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I don't even know what can be said about it, but do your best.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, Ricardo Montalban. Okay. But yeah, it's my absolute all-time favorite Star Trek movie. And of course, it is based on a Star Trek episode where we meet the character Khan. And he was a convict who they woke him up, and he caused some havoc and then got exiled to a planet by Kirk. And then, of course, after 15 years or so, he escapes and he steals a device called the Genesis machine, which actually can transform dead planets. And so, of course, he's not going to do anything good with it. But his main goal after he escapes is to take revenge on Kirk for exiling him. So, so in the process of defeating Khan, this is where Spock dies. So this is where we see from radiation poisoning. So this is where we see the whole scene. Oh my goodness, that scene! The whole scene with Spock and Kirk when Spock is dying and he puts his the Vulcan, the Vulcan on the window there, and the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And so that to me, that's one of the best scenes in the Trek universe. And then of course, like I said, Ricardo Montalban is just the absolute best Trek villain. I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody has to say, you would never change my mind. So he is the absolute best Trek villain. And just that Khan, I just, and the hair and the chest, and it was just, to me, I could watch it. In fact, I do watch it fairly often. So I confess. That's my top 5.
Yeah, that's a wonderful list. Were there any that just didn't make the cut that you sort of debated about?
I didn't debate too much. The Final Frontier, I like them all. I watched them all. I've watched all the Star Trek series. I watch Star Trek Discovery right now. And then there is, I think in terms of, I like them all, but this one is better written. Like Deep Space Nine to me is the most well written of the Star Trek series. So there wasn't really, like I said, the only one I really waffled a little bit on was the J.J. Abrams. And I put it on here because if you are thinking in terms of bringing in new Star Trek fans, new Trekkers, then this is one that can bring them in. It's a new Star Trek for a new generation. But I probably, if I had to say there was an honorable mention, maybe the Final Frontier.
It's a very strong original cast representation here.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep. And that's the reason. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
but that's why the Final Frontier is not on here, is because I put the J.J. Abrams on it. So.
No, that makes sense. I guess as a way to sort of close this out, if you sort of think, as I sort of project towards the future, I guess, what in your mind does sort of science fiction or Star Trek sort of have to say for the 21st century, as sort of we think about our time? Science fiction is about the future in a lot of ways, but a lot of times it's also about the present. How would you sort of begin to think about that? I know that's a complicated and deep question in many ways.
I do think that one thing that we can learn from Star Trek, and especially from the older ones, is the working together, because the crew always works together. It doesn't matter which Star Trek you're watching. They have their issues, they have their differences, but in the end, they come together to get done what needs to get done. Caring about in this case, it's the Federation or whatever group, but caring about that entity, caring about the fact that we all have to be here together. This is where we live. This is where we have our being, and so just caring about that, and then curiosity, and just the fact that go where no one has gone before. And to me, that speaks volumes. To be curious, to want to know what is going on, to want to know what is happening with other people, not even necessarily other worlds. What's happening with other people? What's happening over there? I know it affects what's happening over here. And to be curious about that and how we can help each other, because we're all on this planet. We're all on this planet together. And what you do way over there actually is going to, at some point or another, affect what's happening on the other side of the planet. And I think that Star Trek really speaks about that. It addresses it. One of the things that I really liked about the original Star Trek was that it was one of the first shows that had a diverse crew. There were, I remember seeing Nichelle Nichols and just going, "Oh my goodness," you know.
Mhm.
So you saw people from other planets. You had Spock. You had Uhura, who was the communications officer, and you had
Sulu.
Sulu. So
Mhm.
you've got a very diverse right there on the bridge. And so to me, that was awesome. My mother couldn't understand why I loved Star Trek because nobody in my family likes science fiction except me. Uh, but I have to say that was one of the things that drew me because I watched Star Trek, of course, in reruns, the original. But then they carried that on, they carried it through, and they made things even more diverse. And then you began to see, you saw women captains, and then you saw Commander Cisco, which of course I was one of the people that
Mhm.
wrote a letter because when he first started, he was a commander. And I'm just like, why is the only Black person who is the head of a starship or head of something
Mhm.
in Star Trek universe, a commander? And so pretty soon after, he was promoted to captain. But just to see him in charge, and of course, I could listen to him read the phone book. So
Yeah.
with that voice,
Mhm.
so
Well, and his role too, as seeing him as a parent too, and I think especially in
exactly.
that era, I think it
Yes,
is
yes,
really
absolutely,
significant.
absolutely. A
Yeah.
single dad because his wife had passed. So yeah, so it was. There's just so much so many lessons in the Star Trek universe that I think that pertain to right now. They really do. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Moham, for joining us today, and
my
I
pleasure.
appreciate your insight and your top 5 Star Trek films.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.